We are going to be starting in 6 minutes. We are going to be starting in 6 minutes. Does everyone hear me? If you hear me, please send in a message into the chat box that you can hear me. If you can hear me, please send the message to the chat box that you can hear me. We'll be starting in 6 minutes. Chief, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Happy to be here.
We'll be starting in just about 5 minutes. Hi, Joan. Nice to see you. Hi, Avi. Great to see you. We'll be starting shortly in just a couple of minutes.
Why can't we hear anyone?
Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Elmat. So, what's that?
We're just getting set up with Facebook, so this is live together at the same time.
Okay.
For those of you who are with us on Facebook, could you leave us a note that you can hear us, that this is all working fine? Please let us know that you can hear us so we can get started. You can type in where you're tuning in from. You can type in hello, whatever you'd like to type. Just let us know that you're on with us at this time. And is Sheriff Carr on? You say hello, Sheriff. If you're on, can you unmute yourself? Awesome. Could you unmute yourself?
There we go.
Awesome. And Chief Smith, can you unmute yourself as well?
Yes, sir, I am here.
Okay. Awesome. We are going to get started. Hello and welcome, and thank you all so much for being here with us this evening for our Zoom presentation with Teton County Sheriff Matt Carr and Jackson Police Chief Todd Smith, titled "A Day in the Life of a Wyoming Police Officer." My name is Rabbi Zalman Mendelson, and I have the honor and pleasure of serving as a co-director of the Chabad Jewish Center of Wyoming, together with my dear wife, Razy. It is wonderful to see familiar faces, and those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you so much for being here with us. Our mission at the Chabad Jewish Center of Wyoming is to share the beauty of Jewish tradition, history, education, and Torah with the Jewish community of Wyoming and beyond. Most importantly, during these challenging times of COVID, we know that these Zoom presentations are a form of community gathering and are particularly important, bringing all of us together in a state of unity. So it is a deep pleasure and honor to be doing these special events that bring all of us together. In Jewish tradition, we are currently in the process of reading in the Torah each week from the book of Bamidbar. The first of the readings we study this week is called Chukas, which means law. Law. How timely that now we are discussing this idea of laws. Police in a society are a function of any stable, humane society, whether historically or today, require that there are laws and the authority of enforcing them. If humans were all naturally inclined to discipline ourselves and live with a perfect set of morals and values, perhaps there would be no need for laws. But in the real and messy world we live in, evil, selfishness, greed, violence, and abuse does exist. I love the story that they say of the young man Moshe, who just finished his degree in drama from the University of Southern California, and he goes out looking for a job, and he applies to become the next A-list actor in every single film company that he can think of. And no one hires him, and the bills are piling up, and the months are going by, and he's looking, what can I do to be able to get myself a job? One day he sees an ad in the LA Times which reads, zoo looking to hire. And so while he never imagined himself working for a zoo, he decided he would call up because a man's got to do what a man's got to do. He's got to pay his bills. So he calls up and says, hi, my name is Moshe. I see your ad in the LA Times. What is the job you're looking for? And the shopkeeper, who's also Jewish, says, my name is Beryl. We have this big problem. A special monkey that was supposed to arrive to our zoo couldn't get the necessary visas. And as a result, we've already told everyone that the monkey will be arriving this Sunday, but we don't have it here. We need someone to dress up in a costume that looks exactly like the monkey to day in, day out, dance around in the monkey's cage until we're able to get the real one to arrive. It's embarrassing for Moshe to take on this job, but he says, look, it's my only chance, I gotta do it. And so, Moshe is hired. Please put yourself on mute. And so Moshe is hired for the job, and each day he goes into the monkey's cage and he swings from tree to tree, making sounds and prancing around like a monkey, and the crowds begin to show up and clap their hands for Moshe. One day, as he's doing his routine, he does a swing and he misses the branch and he lands in the lion's cage. He looks to his right, he looks to his left, there's no way that he can get out. And the lion is roaring and approaching. And so Moshe remembers the words that his mom taught him when he was just a little boy. On your last day of your life, Moshe, I want you to repeat the words, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O God, God, please return me to my maker. The Lord is one. And as he's reciting these words, all of a sudden, the lion roars back, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso La'olam Vaed, another Hebrew prayer. And from the bear's cage, you hear him screaming, shut up, you guys, you're going to get us all in trouble if you keep this up. If we all nourished our souls a little more, if we all nourished the part of us that lies beneath the surface, the soul that exists within each and every one of us, there would be less pain and suffering in the world. There would be greater compassion and kindness and love and humanity in the world. The problem is that all too often, it's the animal side of us, the bear, the monkey, the lion, that gets the best of us, instead of the soul, which craves nourishment, spiritual, moral, values, purpose. It seeks that each and every day. I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone to do something tonight to feed ourselves spiritually. Do a mitzvah, help a friend, call and settle a dispute with a foe. Give some tzedakah, some charity, study some Torah, or if you are not Jewish, study some other spiritual text. Pray to God, say the Shema before you go to bed tonight. If none of the above suggestions speak to you, try to find ways to humanize people who you dislike. I believe that the greatest civil rights issue of our times is the hard work of breaking up any and all forms of dehumanization, whether it is because we don't like the profession, the religion, the culture, the lifestyle, or the political party. We all have the power to humanize those who are often othered. A few housekeeping items before we begin our interview with Sheriff Carr and Chief Smith. First, I'd like to thank Leon Clark for the time, grace, and effort he put into making this event happen. Thank you, Leon, very much. Second, I want to share with you two of our upcoming events. Please mark your calendars. Thursday, July 2nd, this upcoming Thursday at 7:30 p.m., we're going to be hosting an event titled Jewish Poetry with award-winning poets Yehoshua November and David Kaplan. this upcoming Sunday, July 5th at 10 a.m., a real special event that we're going to be doing titled Doing Life with Mandela, My Prisoner, My Friend, with Christo Brand, who served as Nelson Mandela's prison guard and later became a very dear friend of his. The schedule this evening will begin with a 30-minute dialogue with Sheriff Carr and Chief Smith and myself. During the 30-minute interview, please send in your questions into the chat box that you would like the officers to answer today. Feel free to ask the hard questions, the uncomfortable questions, the questions that you always wanted to ask a cop but never had a chance to be able to do so in person. Please do not send in questions that are dehumanizing, hateful, or partisan in nature. If your question includes the words such as Trump, Pelosi, Republicans, or Democrats, please find a way to remove those words from your question and ask it in a nonpartisan way. We at Chabad believe in including everyone and hope that this event brings our community together. After the formal interview is over, we will ask as many questions that are submitted in the chat box as we can, and we will also strive to include them during the interview, so send them in as the discussion unfolds. As you all know, many in the Jewish community here in Jackson are struggling during this time of coronavirus, financially in desperate need of support. They turn to the place that they know will always respond yes when they are in a crisis. They turn to us at the Chabad Jewish Center, and we do always answer yes. Each and every day, we bring food to dozens of families here in Jackson. I repeat, dozens of families here in Jackson, both Jewish and beyond. It is our great honor and pleasure to be able to support them, but our fund for this cause is running low. Please consider making a one-time tax-deductible contribution at jewishwyoming.com donate so we can continue to answer yes to those who are in need. Finally, it is my great pleasure to warmly welcome Sheriff Matt Carr and Chief Todd Smith. Please put your hands together for a warm Jackson Hole welcome to our beloved officers. Thank you so much. I'd like to begin by expressing how grateful I am to both of you, Sheriff and Chief, who are so busy, yet you've taken the time to share of yourselves with our community. Many in our audience have never had a casual conversation with a police officer, and we are grateful for this opportunity. Personally, I believe the work you do and that of your fellow officers for our community in Teton County is a model for every other police force in the country, and I consider you my personal heroes. You have been there for the Jewish community after Pittsburgh and Poway, after the terrible tragedies that have happened of anti-Semitism all throughout this country. I always receive an email, a call, a visit, a hello, is everything okay? You send patrols around our Chabad Jewish Center to ensure our community is safe. What made you decide to become a cop? Was it for the money? We'll begin with the sheriff, and we'll ask the same question to the chief. Sheriff Carr, please, what made you decide to become a cop?
Well, I first moved to the Valley in 1993, and I started off my Jackson lifestyle as a ski instructor and a fishing guide. And I, of course, fell in love with Jackson and the community that it offered, and decided I wanted to make it home. And back in those days, working as a ski instructor, there was no Four Seasons, there was no glitz that there is today. So it was a tough way to make a living. I wanted to become involved in something a little more serious and a little more community-minded. At the same time as I was working in those roles, I was also a volunteer for the EMS system. It used to be back in the day, it was different from fire EMS. They were not combined. It was just the ambulance service. And I was an EMT and worked as an EMT as a volunteer through St. John's and through that system. So that's what really just caught my eye on community service and public service. Again, first as a medic, and then seeking some sort of a role that I could have a full year-round salary and stay in Jackson Hole and make it a place where I could raise a family. About that time, I met a couple individuals from the sheriff's office, in particular, Detective Dave Hodges, who's still with the department, and some other folks, and just got to know those guys and really start to understand what they did. Search and rescue had a heavy role in, the sheriff's office had a heavy role in search and rescue back in those days. So it really tied in nicely with kind of the emergency service idea and aspect of it. And that's what really kind of drew me to law enforcement. I also took a firearms safety course that at the time was taught by a couple of Chief Smith's employees. And they were just really great people. And they were there to serve the community, and something just spoke to me. And it was like, that's really what I want to do. And that's why I started my role. Again, I kind of first developed my, taste for emergency services through the EMS system, but then met a lot of great folks at both the sheriff's office and the police department. And that's what finally got me to put my application in.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Chief Smith, what got you into this line of work? What drew you in?
First and foremost, thank you for having the sheriff and I here tonight. We appreciate it a lot. Just getting an opportunity to converse with different folks and fellowship a little bit. I appreciate that a lot. So, I guess for me, it was a bit of a different journey than maybe Matt encountered, but there's some similarities too. I grew up in Lander, Wyoming, and Jackson was a place that I had always come to, on vacations and weekends and things like that with my family. And so it was like Disneyland for me. And when I went away to college, I was an art major and loved to draw, loved to do, art scenes of the mountains and the landscapes and wildlife and things like that. And to support myself doing that, I became an airbrush artist. And so I was basically putting myself through school, and I went to college in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And the moment I graduated, though, I wanted to come back to Wyoming, and my mother had moved to Jackson, and her name was Brenda Smith, and she owned the UPS stores in Jackson. And so I came here basically to be an artist, and I opened up a t-shirt store where I was doing airbrushing, and I was pretty much the classic starving artist that was trying to pay the rent prices being on the town square for a business. And a local policeman, his name was Larry Compton, befriended me, and he would stop by the shop, and he would have a cup of coffee, and he would say hello. And I was just kind of struck by the guy, and that when I grew up, I wanted to be something like Larry. And I was newly married, and my wife, our first child was on his way, and I think I was just looking for something in life that was bigger than me, and that I could be a part of, and could bring just some meaning to my life. And so I was hired by the police department at a time when we had the arsons that were going on in Jackson. If you've been here a while, you might know about that. Several businesses on the town square had been burned down, the Virginian Lodge, the Anvil Motel, and the police department was small, and they were looking for someone who was willing to work at night and come out and walk the alleys and try to keep track of the comings and goings of people that might potentially be the arsonist. And so that's how my career started. And I fell in love with it pretty quickly, and was off to the police academy, putting myself through the police academy. There's a number of students that can go through where you pay your way. And so I sold everything I had basically so that I had enough money to go, and went through the police academy. And about halfway through, the police department offered me a position as a full-time police officer, and picked up the cost from there for me. And that was 29 years ago. And so I've been serving here. I've worked both here and at the Sheriff's Department, and I worked for a short time in the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. But my career has all been in this area. So it's been a journey, and it's been very rewarding. It's given more than it's taken. I learn something new every day, and try not to make the same mistakes twice, but often do. And I get joy from it. I feel like what I do matters, and so yeah, I have a lot of pride in what I do.
Thank you for that. Was the arsonist ever caught?
Great question. We did identify a person of interest, and coincidentally, that individual ended up being arrested in Utah for kidnapping a young girl, and is in prison, and has been ever since. But coincidentally, the arson stopped at the same time that he was incarcerated. So we have a strong belief that that was the individual responsible, and things line up to suggest that to be true.
Awesome. So Sheriff Carr, tell us if throughout your career, I mean, now you're the sheriff, but you weren't always the sheriff. What do you like most about the work that you do? And what do you like least about the work that you do? Meaning, what do you find to be most enjoyable? And what are the biggest challenges on an average day? Anywhere from a sheriff deputy or the sheriff himself, what do you find to be the best and the worst part of the job?
Well, I've been really fortunate and have been able to fill a lot of the different positions and roles at the sheriff's office. And so I've really had an opportunity to see each one of those from a different perspective. I started off in 1999 at the sheriff's office as a member of the detention staff, working in the jail. It's a really hard job. We have a great crew that does it. I will say it takes kind of a special person to do that job, because oftentimes you feel like you're serving time with the inmates. So I did that for a number of years, and then I was a patrol deputy for a few years. I've spent some time in detectives, and then at the administration level as well. But the one role that really speaks to me that I really enjoyed was the time that I spent as a school resource officer at the high school. It was a unique job, and it was one where you really felt like you made a difference, and you were able to connect with students and work as not only a law enforcement officer, but as an informal counselor, as an informal social worker, and just try to help students. High school is a tough thing to navigate. In fact, I always joke that it took me 6 years to get out of Jackson Hole High School, because that's how long I was down there. But it was a wonderful 6 years. I actually got to know Chief Smith's son down there, and I'm fortunate enough to have him as an employee now. So really, I felt more connected to the community, and really felt like was able to make a difference with that role. So the role as a school resource officer was one that was always something different every day, and it was entertaining, and it was challenging. And I think it takes a unique personality, and both Chief Smith and I have officers now, or I have a deputy, he has an officer that are fulfilling those roles. And I think it's so critical. And we're so glad to have the school district support to help us fund that program. But hopefully that answers your question. I mean, for me, that was one of the greatest things. Some of the biggest struggles, I can look at Todd and kind of smile. The last few days we've had budget meetings. Those can be some of the most challenging in one's career. Trying to fit in as a leader of an organization and try to work in with the local political system can become quite challenging. I'm fortunate and thankful to be an elected official, but it comes with its challenges to incorporate with the rest of the other electeds in the county to try to make numbers work for budgets. Those things are some of the challenges that become very hard. Obviously, we're having an incredible fiscal crisis right now in our community, and it's really important that we all work together to get through this. And those are some really challenging times. And I think those are right now between us. We have found out that law enforcement was kind of on this high note as we entered the COVID crisis and our response. and it was very demanding on our officers, the men and women of our office. And then all of a sudden, we've gone from this high position of respect to just the biggest downhill slide I've certainly seen in my career with what the nationwide pushback is on law enforcement and some of the defunding topics that are going on right now. And so, you know, I was joking with Chief Smith last week. I mean, he's ending up his career with a global pandemic and law enforcement probably at an all-time challenging position in the nation. It's a really tough time, or perhaps it's a good time to get out. I'm not quite sure. But it's those sorts of things that are so challenging. And I look at how it is affecting our deputies, and that's really hard to go through. We all have that added stress level with the COVID crisis, and now we're sandwiched in between a national police crisis, and that's really tough.
Thank you very much for sharing that. A question came in from Maya that I'm just going to read. If you knew what, Chief Smith, I guess this is really relevant to you. If you knew what it would be like today with the environment that has become more and more hostile towards police, where people talk about police as having some kind of unique systemic corruption. For some reason, it's unique to police, and sort of every cop is painted with the same broad brush, even though obviously in every society you have bad apples, but somehow by the police it's turned into this, like, they're all bad. There's something innately wrong with every police officer. So she asked, would you still have chosen law enforcement if you would have known what you know now back then? And would you have encouraged your son to go into law enforcement?
Great question. I have a very simple answer is yes, I would have gone into law enforcement. I have a deeper love for not only the people that I work with and the people that I do this job for, you, but for the profession as a whole. And I see what the 5 o'clock news wants you to believe about every law enforcement agency and every law enforcement officer. But my personal experience has been so dramatically different than that. I've been coming to work here for almost 3 decades because I like what I do and I like who I do it with and who I do it for. And my experience has been that the people that I work with are amongst the finest human beings that I've ever met. And now that's not to say that I haven't worked with someone that I didn't see the world through the same lens, or I didn't share their politics, or maybe I just didn't like them, their personality or something like that. But I'm also not naive enough to think that there aren't police officers out there who do a disservice to this profession. And it's been really hard lately. Like Matt was saying, it's been very tough to come in every day when you perceive yourself as somebody who doesn't do this for the money, who comes in every day hoping to try to do something good, and to only be faced with some obstacles of being labeled as something, sometimes even less than human. And I have watched our police officers and our deputies be verbally abused by people the last few weeks. And it saddens me because I do feel like the world is maybe judging everyone the same, and I just don't believe that to be true. That that's not been my personal experience. And Matt would attest to this too, that at least in our small world here, when there have been situations where maybe someone was hired and ended up not being the right person or the right fit, it has been very easy for us to do the right thing and to get that person out of law enforcement. And fortunately, that doesn't happen that often. But the times that it did happen, it wasn't a decision that was like difficult where I felt the need that I needed to protect that person, because they were a cop. I felt like I needed to protect the profession and the sanctity of what we were doing. And one person who would represent us in a negative way would really affect all of us. And so that's not difficult for me to come to that place to do the right thing when we're talking about maybe someone's termination or something like that. But I very much am proud of what I do and the folks that I do it with. And I think we are a model of what, we're not perfect, but we're a model, I think, of what other law enforcement agencies could aspire to be. And so, yeah, I would have done this again. And it's given me everything I have in life. And I'm proud. And actually, 2 of my children are in law enforcement. I have 3 boys, and 2 are in law enforcement. And they are fine young men. And, I'm proud of both of them, but I'm proud of the sons and daughters of many other people that work at the police department and the sheriff's department as well. And we are blessed here. We really are. And so I hope I answered that adequately.
Yes, thank you very much for that heartfelt, personal expression. I'd like to, I guess I'd like to follow up on what you just talked about, Chief, and then pass the same question along to the sheriff. You operate 2 different departments, and I'll put 2 questions together as one. Cheryl Hutt asks, what is the difference between the sheriff's department and the police department? How do they interact in law enforcement in the community? And on top of that, if you could also answer the question of what policies and procedures do you have in place when there is a bad apple, or when when a police officer does misbehave, to get rid of them? And what lessons could other police forces in the country learn from what we're doing here locally? Chief.
Am I starting with that question?
Yeah.
Thank you. The difference between the police department and the sheriff's department, there's probably more the same than there's different, to be honest with you. It's really about jurisdiction. The police department receives its authority from the city council, and our primary responsibility is to enforce all laws, both state laws as well as municipal codes that the city council has created within the city limits. And anytime you take a large number of people and put them in close proximity to one another, you begin to have quality of life type issues that will emerge. And that's where city ordinances tend to get their life from. And they're your elected officials coming up with what they perceive as solutions to those problems. And your police department becomes the extension of the enforcement aspect of carrying out those new laws that are created by your city council. But we do enforce state statutes as well. The sheriff's department is enforcing state statutes primarily, and their jurisdiction is outside the city limits. But the sheriff can speak to this too, but he has a number of statutory requirements of some things like running a jail, search and rescue, and a number of other things that are mandated by state statute, that he, as an elected official, be specifically responsible for the mission of carrying those out, where the police department does not carry the burden of that. And so I would say there's more of an emphasis in a police department about your patrol division, your folks who are responding to 911 calls and coming to your problems to try to find solutions to them, where the sheriff's department certainly has that mission as well, but it has a number of things on top of that, such as the jail, search and rescue, civil processing, and a number of other things that fall into his purview of responsibility. And then, some folks might ask about the highway patrol. The highway patrol exists, and they're really only dealing with jurisdiction within the highway. And so Not that we don't have joint jurisdiction in some areas, we can go and assist and help one another, but we have a primary responsibility within a geographic area of those, of carrying out the enforcement of those laws. And I think the second half of that question about dealing with somebody who is maybe a bad apple, for a lack of better terms. We both use a system that was created a number of years ago. The police department had a lieutenant who had worked in the Denver Police Department, and he brought a great idea, and I really think it was revolutionary in helping to change certainly how the police department functions, and I think it helped the sheriff's office as well. But most businesses traditionally have a system where you are doing evaluations of somebody at the end of the year. You know, the annual evaluation that we all dread. And, you know, we get to sit down right before Christmas and find out whether we've been a good employee or a bad employee. And we do it differently than that. We don't really rely upon an end of the year evaluation, but we evaluate someone every day that they come to work. And we have a program called, we call it, you could name it anything you want, but we call it a supervisor's situational report. And in essence, it's glorified note-taking, but everything that we do and we interact with a police officer, good, bad, or indifferent, we hope that more things are good than bad, but we capture that information, we sit down with that person face to face, and we address those issues with them. But they don't just live in our minds, they live on paper. And it begins to tell a story, though. And as you collect those and you're doing those on a monthly basis, it becomes a red flag system for you when you can look at something and see if somebody is getting more complaints than someone else, or the types of complaints that may be emerging with that person. And but it affords you the opportunity to have early intervention. And now I will tell you, not every problem you have with a police officer, I don't see it as my role and my job to try to eliminate them from law enforcement. I see it as they are humans and they make mistakes, and it is my role to correct those things if I can. Now, there are some things in life that we could all agree on are not correctable. There are character flaws in people that I may not be able to intervene early enough to change those things. But what I have found is the majority of shortcomings of police officers are about lack of training. And so you identify those things early, and you send them to the training that can up their skill sets and change those kinds of deficiencies in performance. You can often take somebody who has marginal performance and turn them into exceptional employees. But if you get to that place where there's somebody that just needs to go, it often is triggered by some event, and an internal affairs process takes place. And I often will utilize the sheriff's department for transparency. If I have a problem employee, I will go to Matt and I will say, will you come into my agency and investigate that problem for me? And that way I'm not policing my own. He is giving me an independent review of that, where if Matt is having a problem in his organization, he can come to me and I can have somebody in my organization investigate that incident for him. And so it creates a degree of separation. And, but for the police department, I don't hire or fire anyone. I make recommendations to do that to the city manager. And, but it always comes on the heels of an internal affairs investigation, a gathering of facts, a gathering of information. And then I come to a conclusion based upon comparing that to state statute and comparing that to our policies and procedures. And if I feel that this is a situation, though, that could be criminal in nature, then I will actually ask the state police, the Division of Criminal Investigation from Cheyenne, to come in and do an investigation for us. And but we always do an internal parallel investigation within our own organization to compare things to policy and procedure. And if at the end of that process we determine that this person shouldn't be in law enforcement, I simply make a recommendation to the city manager. And I've never had a situation where I've made that recommendation that it wasn't upheld and followed, where I've recommended, you know, someone be terminated and or some sort of disciplinary situation for something lesser.
Well, the two of those things together sounds great. The daily keeping up to date with the police officer and also the additional training. The additional training, I guess, would be one reason to consider not defunding the police, but increasing funding for police at a time when there's a lot of challenges that are going on with police interaction with the community, all types and stripes of problems, the pandemic, additional work that needs to be done to ensure that the police are up to date and ready to be able to handle the challenges of today. I would imagine that you would need increased funding. Sheriff Carr, could you address the same question? What policies and procedures you have in place to, if there's a bad apple? And I would just add, just for accuracy purposes, there are bad rabbis. I've met them. They're bad, any kind of person, any kind of group that you have. There are groups of, there's going to be individuals in that group that are bad. And the same thing would obviously ring true for any large police force, any large organization. So what do you do to get rid of those bad apples? And what are some of the policies that you have in place, both with regards to getting rid of bad cops, and number two, getting rid of bad procedures? Do you have any procedures that you've long ago have addressed that are hot on the market today, big discussion, that other police forces may be able to learn from the model that we've adopted here in Teton County?
Well, that's a pretty big question, but really good one. I think, the chief did a really good job of answering kind of how we work and coordinate and monitor our folks. The only difference I would point out for the sheriff's office is because I'm an elected official, I don't have to go through a city manager to make those decisions. And I think that's just one of the differences, and I count myself fortunate for that. We do, both the chief and I have departments that are of the size that is, we're in a wonderful community because we know all of our officers and we know them really well. We also have really good supervision over our deputies and officers, which is something that is just unique to the size of an agency that we have. They asked a question before and the chief answered it in regards to doing law enforcement in these times. I love my job and I love what I do and I love law enforcement, but I'm not sure I'd want to be doing it in a big city right now. And I think we're so fortunate here because we have community support. Certainly, there's some, and I saw one of the questions on the chat room, there's some loud voices out there that are making a lot of noise right now, even in our community, but they're a small minority, and the silent majority is beginning to speak and support the work that we're doing here locally. And I think that's been a great morale boost for our people working in those situations. But yeah, certainly we've looked at our policies. Well, we both, and I'll just speak for the sheriff's office because I know, quite frankly, Todd's done a much better job than we have, but we're going through a complete rewrite of our policy and procedure right now. And that was planned just with me getting elected and taking over the office. It was pre-COVID. It was pre all of the pushback on law enforcement. We were in the throes of a complete rewrite on their policy anyway. But it's also given us an opportunity to look at some of those policies and certainly around our custody and control policies and refine those to hear some of that local or that national rhetoric that's out there, because there are a lot of folks that are just making noise, but there's also a lot of folks that have some really good ideas and that are really speaking their mind. And we'd be remiss not to listen to that and make sure that we're doing things to the safest ability that we can. We've made some modifications in our custody and control policies, and those are the policies that tell our officers when we have to put hands on somebody, how we do that. And we've been able to make changes on the fly that I believe the state, we only have one state academy in Wyoming. And I believe the state academy will probably catch up, but we're much more versatile here at the local level to be able to make those changes in response to what we think is right. And we can do that through policy and procedure, irregardless of what the academy is still teaching. And a lot of those have to do with what you saw happen in Minnesota with, you know, the takedown techniques, how you, when you have an uncooperative person that you're dealing with, how you handle them. And we've already made those changes. We have never, for quite some time, we haven't allowed any sort of neck restraints. When we take somebody to the ground, we don't put knees on them, even though that's taught in the academy. That's something that we've changed here locally in response to what's going on. We think that there's other ways and better ways to do that. So I think we're able to be a little more nimble than some of the bigger agencies and even the bigger state agencies. So we're always reviewing those policies and procedures and making sure that we're kind of following with best practices. And again, it's fortunate that we can make those adjustments in times of need.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful and very clear. And I'm glad to know that for a long time already, the chokehold wasn't part of the policy here in Jackson, here in Teton County, for custody and control. There's a lot of questions that are coming in. I would like to give voice and sight for the people that are asking questions. I'm going to go down the list for those questions that haven't yet been asked, and I'm just going to call out your name. If you're up for getting on to the mic and getting onto the screen, we would love to see your beautiful face and hear your questions. We have a question that came in from Dan. Dan, would you care to ask your question directly to the chief or the sheriff? Dan, would you like to? Connecting. I think he's connecting to audio, I see. Let me move along to Leon, and we'll get back to Dan when he's back connected. Leon, would you like to ask your question directly to the sheriff or the chief?
To both of you. First, thanks for being here. And second, for those of us who do support police, what can we do to show our support and our love for you? What can we do in this difficult time to help?
Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. Well, Leon, I thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support. I get that there are some folks who are apprehensive to speak up, and I often feel like that is what allows sometimes the voice of unreasonableness, maybe, or uninformed information to go forward when folks don't speak up and talk about the positive experiences they've had with law enforcement. Everyone's very quick to talk about that one situation where they got a ticket or something that was unpleasurable, or they saw this or they saw that. But if folks don't step up and speak to the things that they personally have had experience with that were positive, then I don't think the entire story gets told. And so I guess what I would beg of you or anybody out there who has had a positive experience is balance the conversation by sharing those stories and letting people hear them. I do think that Jackson is going to be one of those communities that it's going to allow everyone to speak their voice, I think, good, bad, or indifferent. And but right now, the few are controlling the narrative, and they're so focused on just the negative. I think we have to bring balance to that conversation.
Great question, great answer. Karen, you had a similar question, but if you can come on mic, ask it yourself or ask any other question that you want, please go ahead.
Well, it's a little embarrassing because I'm one of the scared people, and I'm usually fearless. I'll rush into any situation and speak my mind, but I've never seen mob hysteria like this. I mean, I thought of writing a letter to the editor thanking you and saying, putting in a few facts about how actually superlative our police are locally and really across America. There are very few problems that show the same amount of correction as the problem of police brutality. You know, if you look at the charts over the last 30 years, it's just a line that's gone down. It's almost nothing. You know, I think you guys have bragging rights, and instead you're being attacked. And yet I literally am afraid to even write a letter to the editor here in Jackson. I think I would be mobbed. I just feel like there are very nasty people out there, and I'm scared. And I know it's unhealthy for our community to be silent, but I really would fear for my personal safety. And that's a horrible thing to say. So,
Aaron, thank you very much for the question. Before we have the sheriff answer, I just wanted to add a little comments on top of what you said. I recently had the distinct honor to go to a town council meeting where the police budget was under review, and the chief had asked me if I would go in there and express my support for the police after I had asked the chief what I can do to support him during this time. So he responded, go into the town council meeting and express your support for the police during the budget discussion. I came in there thinking, what's the big deal? I'll go in, I'll say hello, I'll say thank you to the police, and that would be it. And I don't know, 15, 20 fellows from, I don't think most of them have been living here for much time at all, or if they live here at all. But they got up and they just said, defund the police, defund the police. The police don't deserve our community support. And it went one by one by one. And I looked around to see if anybody was going to get up to express their support for the police. And I was the only one there. And I felt like I was literally walking into the lion's den, that I was in the belly of the beast, in a place that had so much animosity towards police. And to express that, I was literally worried for my safety. And so I can totally understand what you're saying, Karen. I felt very uncomfortable in that room and felt uncomfortable afterwards, and added some additional security measures to make sure that we were safe during that time. But Sheriff Carr, how would you respond to Karen?
Well, Karen, I have attended quite a few meetings where there's been public comment towards the defunding idea. And the group that's really leading that up is a group called Act JH Now. And they're a bunch of millennials, and I think they're well-intended. But what I've seen over the course of probably the last 2 or 3 weeks is their rhetoric is changing a little bit. You know, they came in strong, and certainly when the chief was in his budget meetings, that was when they were at their most visceral type responses. And so much of those responses were using national rhetoric that quite honestly didn't apply here, just like you said. Many of them had examples of encounters with law enforcement that happened somewhere else, or they haven't been here for much time at all. And over the last 3 weeks, I've really seen their communication change. And I've been pleasantly surprised by it. In fact, we had our final budget meeting in there today. And I guess one of the leaders got up and just said a quick 2 or 3 minutes. And none of it was negative towards the police. They were all being appreciative of being heard. And the conversation tended to switch from defunding Chief Smith's agency and my agency, and more about funding some more of the social services. I think that the last few conversations I saw, there was some real leadership in that group that stood up and said, hey, you know, we're not making accusations of racism here locally. We just believe this is a systemic problem, that there are ways to address some of our social issues beyond using police to be kind of the cleanup folks for all of the community's issues. So I guess I understand how there's some real reluctance to get out and speak, but I think this is a safe community to do that. We've had a couple of demonstrations here, but they've been very peaceful in nature. I think that this group has really backed off that whole real aggressive national rhetoric, and they're starting to understand the community, and they're understanding the job that the folks that work for the police department and the folks for the sheriff's office do here locally. And they're almost, you know, I had, in fact, the last 2 days ago, I had a lot of them speaking up, demanding higher wages for our dispatch crew because they felt like there was some inequity there. And they were feeling that dispatch was such an important job. And they were banging their fists on issues that I've been talking about for over a year and a half. So I almost felt support. And it was really nice to see that a lot of this nationwide nastiness has gone away as this group has educated themselves a little bit more about how things work in Jackson Hole. So that's been refreshing. But I understand your reluctance. I think, you know, letters to the editor are great. We've seen a lot of public support. Again, I'm going to say that silent majority. We've had folks come in that have bought lunch for our staff just to express their appreciation. We've gotten cards from kids. All that stuff means a whole lot to the men and women of law enforcement right now, and it's been much appreciated. So perhaps if you don't feel making comfortable a note to the editor, sitting down and writing a note just in general to the men and women that are working in local law enforcement, it's something that we'll post on a board and make sure that our people know that they feel the support. So that's really helpful. So thank you.
I do want to acknowledge Pastors Jim and Cherie Hall, who are here with us from Gateway Church, our dear friends. And they supply, I believe, dinner once a week for the police here in Jackson. So thank you for doing that. And Razy and I had the pleasure of bringing in a bunch of what we called cop cakes to the police and to the sheriff department today with our kids and some friends in the community. And we had a great time doing that. Thank you, Malka, for joining us on that thing. I see you're here. Let's get to some more questions, and let's try to keep the questions brief and the answers brief so we can get to as many as possible. Kelly's iPad. Kelly's iPad, would you like to come on mic? I can't hear you.
Sorry, that was a question my husband had posed and he stepped out and now I'm unprepared. Sorry. I can, let's see if I can read it. He asked, how's local law enforcement developed any new plans or protocols to deal with the issues of tourism, introducing additional health burdens and civil disturbances? So I think somebody answered that briefly, but as far as any of the health issues, perhaps if you can comment on that. And sorry, this is my first time with Zoom, so I'm not familiar with everything.
You're doing great. Thank you, Kelly. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. There are some current events that have taken place this week. We are having an uptick in Jackson with COVID-19 cases. You know, I think we all came to this a little bit unfamiliar with what to expect. And as we've gone forward, things started to open back up, and businesses were struggling, being closed. And as they've opened, more tourists have showed up. And for anybody who's been on the town square lately, you would notice that it's pretty busy. And so it was predictable that our cases were going to go up, but part of what's causing that too is we're doing better at testing. And so on the front end of this, there was not a lot of testing taking place. I think had we been doing that, we probably would have seen equal numbers or even higher numbers in the beginning. But we are seeing an uptick, and the response to that by local government is we have a public health officer, Travis Rydell, and he really makes the recommendations to the state. And then the state health officer, Dr. Harris, she has to agree with his request to put any kind of public health orders in place for Teton County. And so he has done that recently, and he is attempting to get a mask order in place. And really, for simplicity purposes, I would say it's easiest thought of as a ban on or the requirement of wearing a mask while you are indoors in a public setting. And or if you were standing in line outside of a restaurant waiting to get in, or a movie theater or something like that. It does apply if you're riding on public transportation, in a taxi and things like that. But generally speaking, this is an indoor kind of approach to try to get folks to wear a mask. And my take on that has been that from a public health perspective, that is probably a good thing to do that, where it's a simple ask. We ask people to wear seatbelts. We ask people to wear helmets when they ride a motorcycle. Maybe this is just where we are in the world right now, and putting a mask on is not an overly complicated thing to do to try to help your neighbor and potentially yourself. Where I am concerned about that, to be honest with you, though, is they're asking law enforcement to be the entity to go out and enforce it should there be a violation. And so I have only asked my folks to do it on a complaint-driven basis, to not proactively go out and look for someone who doesn't have a mask on and make contact with them. But if we get a call, go there and first make an attempt to just educate, try to gain compliance in that regard. But I'm not interested in us arresting people or even citing people if we don't have to do that for this. But to approach it more from a common sense perspective. And now we all know there may be somebody out there who doesn't want to do that, but rather than getting a ticket or getting arrested, maybe they choose not to do commerce in that particular business or something like that, and they have 10 other choices, or maybe they can order something online or whatnot. So people have choice, and we'll just go out and try to encourage that, and but not put them in the position of, or law enforcement in the position of feeling like this has to be something that is heavy on enforcement.
Thank you very much. Bonnie Goodman, if you can ask a very quick question. We're almost out of time. I don't want to go too much over 8:30. If you can ask a really quick question that ends in a question mark to the sheriff before we close out, that would be great. Bonnie, are you on? Calling on Bonnie. Bonnie Goodman, would you like to come on and ask a question? Okay. I guess she's having some technical difficulties. I would like to ask Steve Liebler if he would be up to coming on and asking a question. I know that you've had some thoughts about this discussion for quite some time, and we'll get Steve, and then hopefully it's a quick question for Steve, and then we'll get to Bonnie afterwards. Steve, go ahead.
I'm not sure I have a quick question. Thanks for the opportunity. Excuse me. Thanks for coming on, gentlemen. One of the things we don't have is communication with policemen. And you do a wonderful job here. And I can't imagine you could imagine some of these things that we see on TV happening in Jackson. So what in the world has gone wrong with our country? How did we get into this situation? When you watch the things on TV that we all watch, and don't you say, how is that possible? How could they be doing that? What caused that? Where are they coming from? Who's in charge of them? How did this happen? You said, Sheriff, you're glad you're not in a big city. I imagine someone could speak to a policeman trying to take down or immobilize someone that they think is a threat, and then they're surrounded by thousands of jeering people with video cameras and yelling at them, and there's a fear involved. But nothing I can imagine can excuse the same kinds of things that I've seen. We have to address that, because that's what the paintbrush is all about. We think all cops can do that. I don't think that. But that's what we're facing, that there's something.
Steve, end with a question mark. We got to get a move on. End with a question mark.
What would you say to the country at large as to how do we fix this?
Well, my first suggestion would be to quit watching TV. That's something that I've done quite some time ago. You know, again, I go back to this wonderful community that we live in, and it's just a special place. And I think we need to do everything we can to keep it this special, unique place. I don't know quite how to answer your overall problems or issues worldwide. I mean, certainly there's a lot of dysfunction in society today, but you know, I really just want to act locally as much as I can and really know that we have the community support and keep doing a really good job to serve our community. And hopefully that's recognized. And I do feel it is. I feel like we're in a really good spot here in Jackson. And we just need to do everything to hold on to that. And it goes both ways. We've done a lot locally, both Chief Smith's organization and mine, to earn the community's respect and trust. And we have to make sure that we're nurturing that relationship so that we keep that trust and respect. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do. And you're right, whoever said it, open communication is critical. And so these sorts of avenues, you know, I'll just end on tonight. Thank you so much. I've seen some familiar faces on here and some folks that I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet in person. But these sorts of forums and these sorts of opportunities allow the chief and I to connect with the community and really make sure that we're putting in our share to that relationship to make that trust strong, and to make sure that we're doing what's right by the community, and that we're also taking feedback to our folks, that there are a lot of caring community members out there that do support us. And so thank you all for that. And thanks for tonight's opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And we're just going to get to Bonnie, who did try to ask a question earlier. Bonnie, if you can come on mic and make a very brief question, one line with a question mark, because we're over time and we owe it to the officers who have such busy schedules to try to finish this off ASAP. Bonnie, are you there? Testing 1, 2, 3. Thank you everyone so much for joining us this evening. It was such an honor and pleasure to have the sheriff and the chief here with us for an informative discussion. Please put your hands together for Sheriff Carr and Chief Smith for the wonderful presentation, informative, the information that you've shared with us. This was really very special. For those of you, and thank you, for those of you who are ready to call it a night, just sign off. For those of you who would like to continue the conversation with or without the sheriff and the chief, if you guys would like to stay, please do. We would love that. But if you're ready to go, we get it. Let's continue the conversation between those of us who want to continue having this discussion. Let's keep it civil. Let's not use any language that dehumanizes others, whether it's politically or religiously or in any other way. And let's open it up. If you have anything you want to say, open up your mic and say it. Say whatever you'd like.
I'm going to have to part ways here. I've got a couple little kids that I got to get fed and get to bed, but I want to thank you all so much for tonight. So we really
thank you,
appreciate
Sheriff,
it.
very, very much. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Anyone want to come on mic? Malka, you've been awfully quiet this evening. What has happened to you? We can't hear you. You got to unmute yourself. We can't hear you, Malka.
So I was saying that Mikol Melamdai Skalti, from all those who taught me, I've become wiser, and thank you to the chief of police, to the sheriff, This was a wonderful experience earlier today, coming to Wyoming to visit the family here every few months, but I never even knew where the police department was, and to visit both departments today, and was quite an experience. And I feel pretty safe coming from Philadelphia. And actually I saw Dr. Josh Beck on the Zoom call today. I traveled all the way from Philadelphia so he can give me a new knee while Philadelphia is still shut down. So I want to thank all my friends here, the rabbi, the police, the sheriff, and Josh, and my family here for putting up with me for a couple of months. And I can't wait for them to finish their construction on the main road, but it's still such a pleasure to be here any time of the year, summer, spring, fall, winter. And really, I was listening to, I think, Steve asking a question, or rather making a statement about what's going on in our country, in our world. And I know a number of people that are on the Zoom call and some conversations that we had. And I hope that there is a silent majority who is speaking out where they feel comfortable to speak, because I think it empowers people to know what other people think. And I think it's good that we have those discussions. And for those who say, I don't like to speak politics, I don't think that we're talking about politics today. I think this is current event. It's just like you would talk about an earthquake that happened somewhere, or another major situation that's happening, whether in the world or in our country. So I think that we should continue the conversation and do it civilly. And again, Rabbi and Razy and all the rest, thank you so much.
Thank you, Malka. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Leon, let's let someone else who would like to speak who hasn't yet had a chance to do so. Cherie and Jim, please.
Hey, Rabbi Zalman, thank you for hosting this. And Chief, we absolutely were praying for you, and Sheriff had to jump off, but you know, we're new to the area, Jackson, and came from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But it's so refreshing. Rabbi, you have hosted a lot of different things, and Cherie and I are honored to work arm in arm with you and be a part of this community. And just God bless you for doing this. I've had a crazy day. I have another one ahead, so I'm going to jump off. Cherie may stay on, but thank you all for being a part tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for being with us. Thank you for your support for this evening. Cheryl Saul, I see Marty Halverson on. Marty, are you there? Representative Halverson, are you there? We'd love to hear your voice if you are. Cheryl
Yes.
Saul, any questions or
Yes,
comments?
I'm here, and I'm just here to support you in your efforts as you dig into this subject. Just
Thank you.
listening and hanging on every word.
Thank you so much for being here with us. We deeply respect you, and we're grateful to have you with us. Any other questions or comments? Please feel free to go on. Leon, go for it.
In this moment of increased pressure on police, what kind of support or lack of it have you got from the political leadership in the town?
Leon, great question. It's a complicated answer. I believe that you know, I work in particular for the city council, and I believe there are some fine people on the city council. I really do. I think anybody who comes in and is willing to serve the public in that regard for very little money and things like that, you know, my hat's off to them. It's not an easy job. I've tried it myself, and it's not easy. So I will say this, though, some stand out to me as being on the front side of leadership, and realizing that when you watch the 5 o'clock news and you see what's happening in Minneapolis, I don't think any of us, you know, certainly in my department and in Matt's department, looked at what we saw there and said, we're about that. That's not what we're about. I do think that as the story starts to unfold a year from now, and we know more about the history between those two men, I don't know if anyone's been following that story that closely, but both the police officer and George Floyd, who died, worked together in another capacity at a local bar and providing security. And there was some sort of disagreement with them. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, as this starts to develop, maybe we find out that there's more to the story, that maybe this is a disagreement between two people that played out in front of the world, and one person happened to be a police officer. But I have watched in our leadership in the town council, some people really step up and just, Jonathan Schechter, as an example, is a standout to me of somebody on the council who has regularly reached out to the police department, has sent cards of support and thanks. He's working on a proclamation right now to just make a political statement to say we support our police department. And then there's those who have been quiet, and those who maybe who haven't been quite as supportive. Arne Jorgensen has been another person who's been supportive. And you know, if for anybody who follows local politics, Jim Stanford really was a person on the council who was anti-police when he started running for office, and he's completely done a 180. He's been one of our biggest supporters, and he's not staying on the council. He will be moving on at the end of December, but he's really come around to appreciate and understand that his local police department is there supporting the community, not hopefully oppressing it. And you know, with the mayor and I, we've had good conversations. We've had good discussions. I think he may see the situation a little differently, or his role a little bit differently. He tends to focus very much more on the national issue than the local issue. You know, and that's his choice, and I support him in his ability to do that. But I would love to see the mayor come out in front of the world and say, you know, we have a really good police department, we have a really good sheriff's department, and make that the center of the conversation, not one of let's talk about the problems in law enforcement across the country, and then at the end of that make a small comment that things are pretty good here. I just think our folks have done a good enough job that they're deserving of recognition, and the numbers support that. They numbers don't lie in that regard, and so far be it for me to tell him how to do his job. He's got a very difficult job, and he's a good man. He's got good ideas as well, but right now his police officers need him, and they need him to step up in public and to get out in front of that issue and lead from the front, not from behind. And I think I'm kind of putting my cards out there and being honest. He has been generally supportive of the police department over his tenure, and but everyone has a crossroads, and this is ours. And my folks really need him right now, and so I hope word gets to him that timing is important to this, and that he can recognize the gravity of the situation.
Thank you very much for that. Donald, Josh, we would love to hear from you guys. Please jump on if you have something to share. Avi, please jump on if you have something you'd like to say.
Hey, Chief, I just want to personally thank you for your service to our community. You've done an outstanding job. My surgical assistant actually wrote you an email about 2 weeks ago regarding some transients who are staying down in Carnes Meadow, and you gave a beautiful response to them. And I just want to thank you for supporting our community and everybody in it. And we're behind you 100%, and keep up the good work. And on a side note, I was just wondering your advice, other than not speeding, what is the best way to get out of a speeding ticket?
Well, a great question. I would tell you that policemen are people first, and regardless of what business we're in, respect begets respect, and I just believe that we have to talk to a person and not a uniform, and a uniform has to talk to a person. And so I think just being kind, to be honest with you, kindness goes a long ways. A good excuse is never bad to go along with that.
It's going to be tough to justify 120 and a 50, Josh.
Yeah, that might be stretching it a
Thanks,
little bit. So don't see that as a fine, but as a donation. Yeah, I just think we have to be kind to one another, both directions. And you know, most of the problems I see going on between law enforcement and the public is something that we're not good at is we need to learn to communicate better as a profession. And I try to instill that in our officers. I spend the majority of my budget when it comes to training on what I would call more non-traditional law enforcement training, de-escalation, public relations, ethics in policing. I teach a class on ethics in policing, and those things are important to me. And sometimes taking a young police officer and having them go to a class that's not fun, it takes a little while for those things to sink in. And because really policing should be about being a guardian and not being a warrior. And if we can instill that in young police officers and in old police officers, if I can figure that out, anybody can figure that out. And if we will take on that role, I believe a lot of these things will begin to self-correct. But it is really, truly about communication. Come out and go on a ride along with your police department. Come and see what we do. I want to hear from you. I want your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. And but if we talk about things, it affords that opportunity for us to understand one another and maybe head off a problem. But if we don't talk and we don't communicate with one another, and we only look to the newspaper for our facts, then I think we're missing part of the story there. You know, there's that adage about, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. And so newspapers are often taking the one thing that we did that week that didn't go well and sensationalizing it. But we did thousands of other things throughout the month that went really well that never get any attention. And so just come out and communicate. You're welcome to come to my office anytime. My coffee pot is always on, and you know, come in and if you've had a bad experience, I want to know about that too, because if I don't know about it, I can't fix it. But I do believe we're doing a lot of good, and just educate yourself, find out what we're doing, but educate us too. It's a two-way street.
Well, keep up the good work. We're behind you guys.
Thank you. Representative Halverson, I see you raised your hand. Was that?
Yes.
You want to say something?
Thank you, Rabbi. I do have a question. The biggest complaint I hear with my friends who have encountered law enforcement is the question, may I search your vehicle? Please give me some information on what profile, what behavior prompts the question, may I search your vehicle?
Marty, that's a great question. I will tell you this, that every policeman's a little different, but when I worked on the street, I'm generally not, I would have interactions with say dozens of people in a given shift. And so if I'm asking that, it's because there was something, you know, my intuition was telling me I needed to ask the question. I didn't want to search every car I came across. I don't need to do that, to be entirely honest with you. And so I think good common sense on the police officer's side has to prevail there. We don't need to search every car, but potentially there's something on some traffic stops. Maybe it's something I've seen. Maybe, you know, I smelled something. Maybe it's the behavior of the driver. I'm trying to put together a story and understand, you know, is there more to this? Am I just stopping you for speeding, or might you be that car that is bringing, you know, narcotics to our community, or you know, it was involved in a burglary the night before. But I think that logic has to apply here, and so a good police officer is sizing things up and looking at the totality of those circumstances. If you have people in your community who are just wanting to search everybody, I would tell you that's problematic. I don't think that's what law enforcement's role is, and I don't think we should do that. I think we should use and be selective in those decisions when we do that. But Marty, I would hope that if you know, a friend is being asked that question, it's because the police officer saw something that stood out to them that made them ask the question. But a person does not have to allow or give consent to search their car if they don't want to do that. That's why we have warrants, and those are based upon probable cause. And if a policeman feels like there is reason to do that, they can take the car, hold it until you get a warrant, and they can apply for that, and they'll either get the warrant or they won't. But you don't just have to give consent to do that. I think we do harm to our industry if we go out and we ask every person to do that. If you're experiencing that, I would dare say that that's a young, inexperienced police officer who's trying to figure out what his role in the criminal justice system is, and it maybe isn't getting it just right.
Thank you, Todd.
I have a quick question, officer. Did you get any cookie or cupcake?
Yes, I did. What you can't see is I have right, but you know, down here a little bit lower, I have built this over years. So thank you for helping me maintain that.
It's the Robertson and the kids were busy. We just helped deliver them. Yeah.
Thank you, Maka, for bringing that up. And anybody that wants to support our cops, today we went over with our kids and Malka and some cupcakes. We called them cop cakes, and some cookies. And we delivered to the sheriff's department and to the police department just to say thank you and share our support. We watch what's going on around the world, New York City and all over, and we're horrified. And you know, like Zalman said at the beginning, we need law and order in order for to have a safe community, and we appreciate all that you do for us. Anybody else want to share anything, ask anything, say anything?
I would just say that communication, as the chief said, is so important. And I would believe that it should be part of their job to figure out ways to do that. This kind of thing was great. I don't know how often you could do that, but to have it once a year at least, something like that, or a chief of police letter to the editor about what's going on and what's his point of view. That's difficult, I know, but how else do you talk to John Q. Public? And for your own salvation, it's important to do. And not always people will reach out to you to say, come talk to us. Perhaps you can figure out ways to do that, either through the newspaper or through other programs like this, because it's important. If we don't get to know you, we don't understand you, and we can't get to love you, which we need to do, because we can't be without you.
Thank you. I will tell you, we try to be as communicative as we can be. We've come to rely heavily on social media. We put posts on there regularly, and I know not everybody is, even I am not into social media necessarily. I don't spend a lot of time doing that, but I have a couple of folks on our team that I try to put up messages regularly to do that. It's become a medium that a lot of people choose to communicate in that regard. But I also do a thing in the summer, every Thursday. I try to pick a different place in the town, and the one that's going to be coming up this week will be down on the bike path on the Gehrman Trail. But we set up a little tent, a little pop-up tent, and we bring coffee, and we do a thing called Coffee with a Cop. And sometimes it will be me, sometimes it will be one of my leadership. But we go there, and we really what we're trying to do is create an environment where you feel comfortable to come up and just get to know us. And maybe you have that one question you've always wanted to ask. And we try to do that. We did mix it up a little bit, and we did ice cream with a cop last summer. And if it ever gets warm enough, we're going to do that again. But we're trying to come up with things like that. I've done a number of brown bag lunches as well, where I will reserve the city council chambers, and I say, just bring your lunch. come in, we'll all sit down, and while we're eating, we'll just have an open dialogue and a conversation with one another. And but what I will own is I need to do it more. And I am retiring on August 23rd, so I won't be there, but I want to be involved still, and I hope to be able to mentor our new chief. I think that person will come from within, and I have committed that I will, even after I retire, I would be happy to come and man that booth at any time, and answer the questions of the public. So.
That's great. That's beautiful. Are you retiring because of what's going on in this climate?
Yes and yes. I'm retiring because I'm old and tired. But I chose to retire right now. If I were being entirely honest, I had a meeting recently with a couple of elected officials. And when I was sitting with them, I felt like I had asked them for very little in my career, other than just the typical, we need this for our budget or we need that. But I'd never felt like I had a personal ask. And I recently made that ask that I needed them to step out into the public and support us right now in a different way than maybe they ever had before, because I felt like there were a lot of people in my department who were questioning whether they're going to stay in law enforcement, or whether or not, if we started to have a problem on the town square with rioting or something like that, that they would be supported. And so at the end of that meeting, it wasn't a contentious meeting by any stretch of the imagination. We had a very good discussion, a good conversation, but I walked away feeling a little deflated, a little let down that the leadership didn't necessarily understand what I was asking, or was willing to give what I was asking for. And so I feel like I was always raised that you negotiate from a position of power. And the one ace I have up my sleeve is to say that if you're unwilling to do X, Y, or Z for the good of my organization and for the people who work there, then maybe I'm not the person to lead your organization. But you only get to play that card once, and after you play it, it can never be played again. And so I played the card in hopes that if I told them, then I guess I need to move on, that the reaction would be, well, let's talk about this further. And it didn't go my way. I didn't win the hand. And so I played the card, and now I get to live with that decision. So.
I'm sorry.
It's our loss.
Well, I'm a big boy, and you live and die by your decisions, and I will greatly miss getting to be the police chief here and to serve. But I'm young enough. I will find something else in some other capacity in my community to participate in the process. And so I've been asked if I was interested in teaching criminal justice classes for CWC, and so I'm looking for a job if anybody knows of one. So let me know. So.
Okay.
Um,
Could I ask Chief a quick question?
Yes, go for it. Good to see you, Donald.
Good to see everybody as well. Chief, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you being here. I wanted to say that, number one. Both my wife and I, we have immediate family that is either in the military or active law enforcement. So of course, we're very supportive of what you do and your career as a whole. And I guess maybe what I'm asking now that you've come forward and said what you have, maybe what I'm asking for is not so much your opinion as chief of police, but maybe as an expert, of someone who's been in law enforcement for so many years. We watch the news and we see what's going on, and we see a lot of out of control situations, and most people are bright enough to understand that the police are not makers of policy. They have people they have to answer to as well. but it's obvious, and it's being propagated by the vast majority of the media, that there is a strong dislike for law enforcement in general. It's just a broad kind of opinion, and the people that, whatever you want to call them, either more conservative or your average law-abiding citizen, which I believe still constitutes the overwhelming majority of people in our country, do support the police. And it's kind of, I feel like you're in a position of, you're widely hated, and then the people that really do support you are kind of looking to see some squelching of these out of control situations. So they're kind of being let down as well. They're feeling let down. And as I said, we understand that you don't set policy, but at the end of the day, you are the thin blue line, and your primary purpose is to make sure that their people are safe and that there's law and order. And then, just the other day, there was that situation, I forget which city it's in, where those people kind of came out of their home that was about to be overrun, and they were unfortunately in a position where they really were scared and had to take the law into their own hands, and now they're being kind of crucified for that. So how do you see the situation winding down, or how do you see it coming to a head, and how do you feel that maybe the overall role of law enforcement will be permanently altered as a result of this time?
Those are great questions and great comments. I was policing pre-Rodney King, and so I was policing before there were cell phones, for you who are out there who are younger.
And if I could just interrupt you real quick, my own personal experience, I was living in Los Angeles during the Rodney King riot.
Okay,
and,
well, you have
and that
great
was
perspective.
well, that was the ominous time of Chief Daryl Gates, which was considered, he was a very aggressive police chief, and basically when things kicked off, all of Los Angeles Police Department basically ran to Parker Center to hide, and everyone was kind of on their own.
Right. Well, I bring that up just because I think it's symbolic to me, because when I was trained a certain way to police in a certain manner, and then Rodney King happened, and it changed law enforcement. It really did. It didn't matter if you lived in LA or you lived in Wyoming. It forever changed law enforcement for the better. And I believe that the current events, that there will be a silver lining to it. I do believe good will come from it. The downside, that the thing that keeps me awake at night, is the good police officers are the ones that are going to leave. The ones that feel, if I go out and do a good job, will I truly be supported when my day of reckoning comes? If I have to use force, will people be there to support me? If you're that marginal cop, you're going. They know they're marginal, and they will choose to hide, and they will stay in this because they're in denial about how to police. And so I fear if the people who support the police don't step up and give hope to those folks who are the good police officers, that what they're doing matters, and that you do support them when they do the right thing, but you will hold them accountable if they do the wrong thing. That's how it should be. But I fear that if the good cops leave this industry out of fear that even doing the right thing will result in a bad outcome for them personally. There's a big conversation about qualified immunity and things like that. What we fail to understand is all public officials get qualified immunity, not just police officers. It extends to other entities in the government as well. And qualified immunity is only granted to me if I'm in the performance of my duties when something happens, and I'm lawful in my actions while doing them. I don't get qualified immunity if I don't meet either of those criteria. And so it's it's a little scary if you're a police officer right now, and you would think that if I go out and I make an arrest and it's a lawful arrest and someone were to resist my ability to do that, and I used any kind of force, that if qualified immunity didn't exist, that they could sue me for trying to carry out the work of the people. And so that's a little scary. I don't think you should get qualified immunity if you were committing a crime and not in the performance of your duties. You would never get it, and you shouldn't get it. But there's a reason why we have that. It's to protect people from frivolous lawsuits. I will tell you, just 2 weeks ago, someone stole my identity and filed for unemployment in my name. And another one of my fellow police officers, someone filed 2 liens against him because he stopped them and gave the person a ticket. And so we will be in a nightmarish situation as in law enforcement without qualified immunity to take away frivolous lawsuits. But it's being sold to the public right now that qualified immunity just protects the bad police officer. And I will tell you, having gone through a number of lawsuits in my career, it does not protect the bad police officer. It only protects the good police officer. And that's been my personal experience anyway. And there has to be a mechanism there to allow someone to go forth and do this job with a little peace of mind, I guess, without worry that everything they've worked for in their lives could go away, even if they made a mistake. And I think there's a big difference between intentional wrongdoing and being human and faltering from time to time. We learn from making a mistake from time to time, and but good agencies recognize those mistakes and do something with them, and they correct them. So they learn from them, they get better, they train on the issue, they correct the issue if there's a problem. So I do think in a roundabout way, I'm sorry here, not to answer if I'm not answering your question, but I believe that this situation is good's going to come from it, but law enforcement's going to forever be changed. There's going to be some things about this in that we're going to lose some good police officers out of fear of the unknown, and it's going to take us years to recover from that. I struggle just to find enough people. I have 4 open positions that I've had for almost a year that I've been unable to fill, and that's out of 24 positions. And so it's just going to be harder. No one's going to apply, and we'll probably get to fear who does apply.
Thank you, Chief. Somebody asked over here on the chat, does the police department have a Facebook page?
We do. Anybody who's interested in following us, if you just go to the Town of Jackson's website, click on the different departments, and you'll see police. Click on there. We have our own page, but we have both a Twitter account and a Facebook page, and you can certainly follow us on there if you like.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions before we sign off? Questions, thoughts, feelings?
Chief should stick around and review all the new people that come up.
Can you hear me, Racy?
Sounds like you have all the
both
right
of you.
ideas.
Saul and Avi are both talking. One second. What were you saying,
Go ahead,
Saul?
Avi.
You started first?
I said I'd like to see the chief stick around and help in the decisions about new appointments. You seem to have all the right ideas and about governance and how to interact with the populace. So it's been very refreshing to listen to you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much.
Avi.
Chief,
Well,
I just
twofold. One,
had a question also.
One
Go
second,
ahead.
Iman. Avi's just going ahead. He's been trying to ask.
no, please, I'll wait.
No, Avi, go straight right ahead.
All right. Well, expression of our gratitude for your time this evening. Learned a lot, and real pleasure getting to know you via Zoom. And I will be on the lookout for those tents. I wasn't aware of them. So hopefully we'll connect with you or one of your officers. Also, presumptuously, if you do decide to stay in public office, I believe you'll have all of our votes. So I'd love to see you continue to take a leadership role in our community. I think you have great perspective, unique in a sense that it's objective and well thought out and well experienced, which is becoming a rare commodity these days. So wish you the best. And again, you'll have our support in your endeavors.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Avi. Do you think it's a rare commodity here in Jackson Hole, Chief?
Do I think it's a rare commodity? Is that the question?
Avi used those words that it's a rare commodity. Do you think that, I know that maybe in the global, national picture, but what's your perspective over here in Jackson?
I don't know. I feel like I work with some very open-minded, talented people. People are in different degrees in their professional life. I see some exciting new people up and coming in law enforcement that just have the great potential to turn out to be great public servants. There's some people in the middle who maybe are burned out a little bit, and maybe they've not had the greatest experience, and but with the right leadership and the right I guess just support and guidance, I think they can be brought along to turn out to be exceptional as well. But I guess our local government is a reflection and kind of that microcosm of our community. Anyone can be elected to office for sure. Where we all have to step up is if we elect someone that doesn't meet our needs, speak up and vote differently. Get out and be involved, and let your voice be heard. And if they are meeting your needs, then give them your support. None of these jobs are easy, and I think there's a mix, though, I guess would be my answer of what's out there.
Ima, you had a question.
Yes, we had a singularly nice experience today with the children, bringing cupcakes and cookies to the police department and to the sheriff's department. First of all, I hope they were good. And second of all, I think it's very important. The sheriff was speaking about relations with the students in the high schools. I think it's very important for the kids in the community to also recognize the value of law enforcement. They're hearing a lot of negative things, and I fear for the teenagers and the youngsters of the community.
I agree. We do have a school resource officer as well that serves in the same capacity that the sheriff did when he worked in the schools. And I have regular meetings with them on a weekly basis to get feedback about what's going on in the school system. And I believe the best police officers we will find will be the ones we develop in our own communities. And right now I'm involved in a mentorship program with Central Wyoming College. So when someone graduates from high school, if they have that interest in law enforcement, we bring them on as interns and spend time with them and let them get to know what policing is really about. It's less what you see on TV and a lot more community policing efforts certainly in a community of the size of Jackson. And but it lets some of those kids realize that police work is about sacrifice and service. It's not just chasing bad guys like they might see on television. And so we're trying to find any avenue that we can to reach that that special someone in our community who is younger and wants to be in this career field. And I've gone into government classes and spoken to and done those sorts of things as well, and you get mixed reviews. But we want to be the olive branch, and we want to take the mystery out of this, and we do ride-alongs regularly with a lot of kids, and let them come out and see what the police really do. But it's enlightening, I think, when folks do come out and spend time with us.
So interesting. Bonnie Goodman has a question. Bonnie, are you able to unmute yourself? Very light. Can you maybe speak up loud?
I think that's about as loud as I can get. Can you hear me a little better now?
Very faint, unless I'm the only one hearing you faint. Are you all hearing Bonnie well, or it's pretty faint?
Hold on one second, okay? Is that better?
No, you sound like you're maybe across the ocean.
Well, I'm in New York. So I might as well be on another planet.
Yes, probably. Okay, just scream your question and I'll try and say it out loud for everybody.
This is just for Chief Smith. I'm a retired court officer, federal district court, and I think that's where he should go look for a second career because he's well suited.
Did you hear that, Chief Smith?
I think I heard her say she was previously in law enforcement and
No,
worked
I
at the
think he
federal
said
district
she's a
court.
retired board officer, and she recommends that as you're looking for a new career. She's been there for 37 years with the board. I'm not sure which board, maybe
New York
which,
City.
the board of New York City. Is that a?
Well, if she, I don't know if she can hear me or not, but I appreciate her pointing me in a good direction. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chief. This has been very enlightening, very educational, informative, and I think a great opportunity for our community. So thank you for giving your time this evening to us, as well as thank you for giving your years to our community and to bettering the safety of our beautiful community.
Thank you for the kind words, and everybody, I appreciate that you would spend your evening with me. I feel privileged to get the opportunity. So good evening to everyone.
Thank you. And I loved what you said about giving in information about a cop, because sometimes we do encounter not the greatest cops or the greatest experiences with our cops, and knowing that you could go stop by and share that information and that will make a difference, I think is good to know, as well as on the flip side, you know, saying something nice about a cop. I was once driving home late at night and one of my lights were off and a cop pulled me over and he asked me where I was coming from so late in the evening, and I told him from a game of Mahjong, and he asked me if I won. And I told him, actually, for a matter of fact, I didn't this time. And when he returned back to my car, he said, "You must be bummed about not winning Mahjong. I won't give you a ticket also." And it was just really sweet and nice and kind. And I have to say, thank God I've talked myself out of all my tickets so far. Like you said, how you talk to them, ask for a warning instead of a ticket. And usually, like you said, if we respond kindly, cops are, you know, many times respond kindly as well. So that was a great piece of information and advice. You're on mute.
I agree, and kindness, if we could spread a little bit of that around the world, we'd all be better off. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful to see you all. Thank you all very much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you all Thursday night and again Sunday morning on our upcoming Zoom events.
Good
Lila
night,
Dove.
everybody.
Thank you all.